right. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to day 6 of Education Week. We're still grinding. We're still going. We're still dropping knowledge on you every single day. Today is an awesome day, just like every other day. We're going to be talking about social equality today, and we have a very powerful group of agents here who are going to be talking about how to be change agents in the market. And I'm going to be happily turning it over to your host extraordinaire, the broker of KW Jersey, Amber Noble. Take it away. Show is yours. You got to unmute yourself first. Let's do that again. Amber Noble, take it away. Show is yours.
Okay, Noah, thank you. Can always count on you. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And Noah, thank you for that awesome introduction. Before I get into, the thing that you've all come here for, I just want to say a few things. And I want to first and foremost talk about the class of the day, which we're super excited about. It's really important to all of us. And that is getting real about real estate. But getting real about race, real estate, and becoming change agents. And that's something that we believe that we have the power to do, right? I want to introduce our awesome panel of speakers and guests. You can't get any more straight shooters than the 3 people that I'm joined by today. First and foremost, our regional director, leader, fearless, fierce, takes no mess, but he's very fair. And that's one of the things I appreciate about him. And that is John Clyde, who's also the OP of Washington Township office, amongst other things. So
Thanks,
John,
thank you. Appreciate being here.
Yep. John is also the chair of the National Social Equity Task Force that Gary Keller charged us to create. We also have Ife Foy, who is a great realtor amongst, other things. And just a great business person and someone who just gives it to you straight.
Thank you.
Hi, Ife. And then Mike McNellis. Is Mike with us?
Yeah, I'm here, Amber.
Okay. Hey, Mike. So Mike is in the fight here with us about social equity. And Mike, just another really transparent guy, really good business person, family guy, but good heart and wants to see us all win.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Okay. So I want to welcome everyone. And before we get into this conversation, I really want to encourage everybody to make sure that you participate in Education Week, because for me, Education Week is almost like a mini mega camp. Like I've literally felt like we've got mega camp for free. It feels like family reunion for free. The programming has been really quality. Gotten a lot of value from it. Can't wait to engage in more. So I want to encourage everybody to tune in after today for the rest of Education Week. Tell your recruits, tell people that, need to be here to see it. They don't have to be with KW. We have a open door policy here. We want to really emphasize the importance of culture and training and leadership, because that's important to us here at KW. And we want to make sure we remind ourselves of that, as well as tell the people in our sphere about it. And that's what makes us unique over here at Keller Williams. If you need to learn more about anything, if you're not actually in the Keller Williams family yet and you're here on this particular class, by all means, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Noah, and you can reach out to Jeremy Bowers. So Jeremy is our awesome CEO and team leader of KW Philly, KW Jersey, and KW Mainline. And he's here to answer any questions, and I'm happy to do the same. All right, so let's get this party started. So the first thing that I actually want to do is, I like to quote Gary, because I think he really says some really poignant things and he kind of encapsulates them in brief little nuggets, but I couldn't really find the quote that I wanted. So I found actually the longest quote probably from Gary, and I thought that it was appropriate. So I'm going to read it to you very quickly. And it was something that he said on May 31st at about 11:14 p.m. He said, "Dear Keller Williams family, I'd like to make one thing clear. Racism is wrong, and Keller Williams stands with the Black community and wholeheartedly supports equality. Right now, communities across America are experiencing tremendous pain. This pain builds and grows exponentially with each name. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Michael Brand, and too many more. Each person had a story, a family, a home, and a life that mattered that was taken away from them. To our Black Keller Williams associates and clients, we are with you. You matter. Your family, friends, and community matter. Your lives matter. You are in our hearts and in our prayers. The truth is that racial injustice and inequality persists. And in order to help change that, it's critical to not only say something about it, but to do something about it. I believe that the real estate community has a unique opportunity to promote healing and reform. The first step is reflection and thoughtful self-examination. Then we listen, we learn, we speak up. That's how change happens. We know many of you are past this stage, and from you, we need your leadership. Effective immediately, we are creating a task force of our International Associate Leadership Council to come forward with recommendations for action to eliminate any racial disparity within our company, our industry, and how we can lead the way in communities where we live and work. I will be reaching out to your regions immediately to ask for a nomination from each of you to join us in this critical effort. I'm proud of the company we've built together, but I know in my heart that we can do more. I believe we can also set an example within the industry by committing more of ourselves to a better and equitable future. We can all do something. Lead a conversation in your market center and commit as a family to create change. Reach out to your local real estate board and make sure that racial equality is reflected in their positions. Ask if they support initiatives and measures crucial to racial and social justice. Then get involved in those you believe in. Now is also the time to check in on each other, speak our truths, and listen with an empathetic ear. While we may not be able to come together in person, we can make a difference. Call, video chat, text, and support each other during this unbelievably challenging time. Take heart and take care of each other. While pain and hate brought us to this moment, love will help us find our way out. Onward, Gary. So I thought it was important, right? Because words matter. And sometimes people don't take the time to read. And sometimes people have challenges with reading. But when you hear something, sometimes it resonates differently, right? So that was the quote I wanted to give from Gary before we actually got into our conversation. And I wanted it to also give some context for the many people within KW who may be here who didn't really understand sort of why this social equity task force thing that they heard about was created and where did it come from and what did it really stem from and what was the genesis of it? Also, what was the great intent behind it? I'm going to start with our first speaker, John Clyde. Now, as a former New Jersey State Trooper, John, for 2 decades, you worked your way up in leadership to the rank of detective sergeant. You worked in specialized New Jersey State Police units such as internal affairs, narcotics, casinos, anti-crime in the city of Camden. Now, many years later, you're an extremely successful regional director. You're a team leader, market center owner and investor, title company owner, landlord, and now you're the co-chair of the inaugural National International Social Equity Task Force, which Gary charged our company to create. You bring a very unique perspective to this conversation, John, about race, real estate, and change. Can you share why you were interested and motivated to take on this huge task and volunteer role to co-lead the KW Social Equity Task Force? And why do you believe the task force is an important addition to the culture and fabric of our company?
Well, thank you for that incredible intro. Appreciate it. And thanks, Noah and Amber and Jeremy and your whole team for putting this on. This is awesome. It means a lot to me as the regional director, and obviously it means a lot by a lot of people. You got a nice amount of folks on this call. So thanks for having me today. So, Amber, I don't know if I said it on this call, but when I was a New Jersey State Trooper years ago, I remember probably a bunch of incidences that I could have maybe handled differently, and I think back, probably like, if you think about the amount of minorities you have in Keller Williams, right? Let's say it's 5% because that's what NAR is. New Jersey State Police was very similar, very, very small amount of minorities. So when something happens, you either are very militant or you kind of just you just become part of the group and you just accept things. And I think I was more of the guy that just accepted things, years ago as a younger trooper. And I definitely seen some stuff. I would say, I was back in the mid 90s. I was a state trooper. So I've seen racial things happen, and, usually not to me or to other troopers, but to other folks that were locked up for menial things. I mean, you can call it what you want, but whether it be a small drug charge or an assault on another person, men, not women, things like that. I don't think it justifies aggressive behavior by us. And we had a tendency as a state police to be very aggressive. We were all, my group that I used to be, we were all like 6 foot something, and I was 250 pounds at the time. And I think the smallest guy on my squad was like 220. We were all really big guys. So when we locked people up, they knew it. It was just that reputation. And I'm thinking back of a time when I was in the Bridgeton barracks, which Bridgeton, if you don't, Bridgeton has some crime there. There's a decent, it's a larger area, probably not as big as Camden, but I allowed a bunch of police officers to really treat a person locked up not the right way. And I did address it, but I kept it there, if you know what I'm saying, Amber. I allowed it to, I stopped the action that day, but I never did anything. I didn't whistle blow. I didn't do anything. And I guarantee you, I'm 100% certain that same group of troopers continued to do that because I didn't do anything about it. I just handled it that day, if that makes sense, right? So to me, this was a little bit more internal for me that, I kind of had a second chance to take a stand for something that meant something to me. And I didn't do it years ago. So when Gary gave me a call at like 10 p.m., that week of when George Floyd was murdered, he called me and Kimber and Bowman Keaty, and he asked how I felt and what I thought about it. And I kind of shared points of what I just shared with you guys. And he just asked, would I be willing to lead this task force? And I shared some of the story, and I also shared, that I was racial profiled, a couple times in my life, pulled over in an all white area, and even profiled as a realtor in a white area, walking around the backyard of a house with sweatpants on and looking crazy, out of the gym, and, cops pull up, and I'm just looking at the house. I have I don't even know. I think at the time we had those big giant Multac keys. If you guys remember those suckers. But, I have experienced it, and, I shared with him, and he said, you know what? I had no idea. And he said, and I didn't care to have an idea, is what he said. He said, I was ignorant to it. I just assumed everything like anybody. I just do my thing and I just move on. And the fact that the sincerity of the way Gary talked really said, you know what, I'm in the right place, and volunteer or not, Amber, I have a responsibility to help and do as much as I can for these agents, for our communities. And that way, maybe there's going to be something that happens in one of your market centers that maybe you'll stop and do something, right? Maybe there's going to be a young minority. I don't care. You could say Black, Asian, Hispanic, gay, you call whatever it is, but they shouldn't be mistreated for whatever they are or who they are, right? And I think if we all kind of are more aware of this, we're going to think before we just act. And I think the main thing that Gary and I and Kimber and Bo said is awareness is probably the biggest thing that everyone on this call can do, no matter what color of your skin, right? Being aware and just at least taking time to have a conversation when you need to have it. And I was telling Chris Lagarde, I don't know if he's on this call, but we have a couple folks on some of our task force that maybe don't know how to handle some things. And I said to him, I said, this is why we signed up for this, Amber, right? We signed up to have these very uncomfortable conversations. And now, as everyone on this call, hopefully after this call, you also have the responsibility of being a leader and maybe a KW agent or or knowing a KW agent, that we also can just do better around the relationships and conversations around race, and if each of us just take one little change in how we have those conversations, just imagine how much we can do, Amber. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree with that. I think you made a great point, and we appreciate you being very transparent and very honest. I said you're a straight shooter. You've always been that way with me. And, and to be able to say that this is a redemptive moment for you, an opportunity to right a wrong, or something that you could have done differently. I think we can probably all relate on some level as something, if we could go back and change something in life, that maybe would have made a different choice. So thank you for making the choice to lead us, because it is not an easy task. And I did say it was volunteer, and I wanted to stress that because I've heard rumblings and people thinking that, you're making $1 million and Kimber is making $1.5 million as the head of the task force.
I didn't see any checks. I honestly, and I'll give Kimber some credit too. I mean, last month we were at the point where we were just like, this is a lot. I mean, we were taking so many calls, and then what we both said, and this was like 6 o'clock at night before one of our calls, we said, you know what, we signed up for this, and we said it was going to be uncomfortable, it was going to be hard. And, if I'm telling other task force members the same thing, I got to do the same. So same thing to us is that, we might take Gary said this to me too. And no, I know you were in the room, but Gary said the only difference between me and you guys is my line's a little bit longer. People wanting to talk to me or the emails I got to respond. Besides that, we all have the same amount of time in the day. And that's the only difference.
Sure. You also talked about awareness. And I think that's very important, because not only do we need to be aware of other people and their place in our world, but we need to be self-aware. A lot of people aren't self-aware. So I think there's some people that do things and they really are oblivious to how it comes across, because it may just be learned behavior. They may have been groomed a certain way, right, growing up. And then other people are just not aware that other people in the world are important too, beyond themselves. So awareness of others and self-awareness is important. But speaking of it being a redemptive moment, Mike, I want to go to you. And you've been very transparent about your upbringing and how it shaped how you view race, neighborhoods and the world at large. Tell us what it was like growing up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and being raised in your specific family. Tell us how it shaped the views you've held for years, specifically about Black and Latino communities and how you interact with those communities.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Of course, and John and Ife, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys as well. I want to just take a second to go back to how my parents grew up, because I think a lot of who we are today as adults is ingrained in us very early on. And my parents grew up first in Philadelphia for a few years, and moved to the South Jersey area. One Italian family, one Irish family. And they decided to raise myself and my 3 siblings in Cherry Hill. And it was a great place to grow up. I have a lot of fond memories of it and a lot of friends that I still have to this day. And I credit my parents with giving me that opportunity. And as I grow up, or as I raise kids of my own, I start to see things through their eyes and realize at certain points where education and experience really starts to provide that type of awareness that John was talking about. And the reason why I've gotten so passionate about this subject is because I feel that my early upbringing and my education really through high school created a void and a vacuum where I had very little awareness around this subject. And, John, you said it taught me to be oblivious. it taught me to ignore things that didn't directly impact me. And if you look at me and you kind of hear what I'm talking about, I feel like I am the definition of white privilege in not so many ways. And I am now at the point where I have to do better for my kids and the perspective that they have and the ability and the choices that they have to make as they grow up in the city of Philadelphia. And they have a much more diverse upbringing and education than I had. That's something I want to give to them. So I know, Amber, you asked about, how my upbringing shaped my perspective on the Black and Latino communities. It really was oblivious. My education was that, slavery happened and we had the civil rights movement and that everything was okay. We moved on with our lives. And it becomes obviously more apparent every single day that is not the case. And the way that we fix that is to talk about it in these type of settings, to talk about it with our families, who that might be a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, and with our close friends, that might be a very uncomfortable conversation. But that's where it starts, is with that awareness and with those conversations. So I'm glad to be able to be here and talk about it with all of you. So thank you.
And we're glad to have you because your contributions matters and is really important. Mike, I'm curious, the murder of George Floyd, how did that affect you? What did you feel when you saw that?
I mean, that was the antithesis. I mean, I'm a 36-year-old guy. This isn't my first experience seeing something like that. However, like I said, raising two daughters in the city now, and being involved in a community at Keller Williams Philly, where I have a lot of friends who are Black, it really started to hit home. And I asked myself, why can this, what allows this to happen? Where does this come from? What is the root of this? How can this be allowed? You see that disgusting photo of a man with their knee on top of another man's head, and you just ask why, and you have a pit in your stomach, and that's really when, for me, it changed from, okay, this is something that I've seen a lot of, and I feel like I could have no direct impact on, to, all right, where's the opportunity here? Where is the opportunity for me to have some type of small impact on maybe one other person's perspective on this? To look at somebody next to me who looks like me and say, are you seeing this? Are you okay with this? That's what I was left with.
Thank you for your candor. We really appreciate that. Ife, you're a successful agent and you're a consistently outspoken voice about things that affect our Philadelphia communities. A statement was recently made in the press by a well-known public person who I'll leave nameless, but many of us probably know who it is, that said Black people have to want to be successful. You have to want to be successful, Black people. As a Black woman, what went through your mind when you heard that statement?
My heart is racing, just trying to put into words like what that says. But I think the first thing that went through my mind was like, wow, this person's really racist and ignorant. I think that statement gaslights people who are oppressed, right? Because to say that people don't want something without, to say people don't want something and that's why they don't have it, I think is baseless. I think that is the type of rhetoric that is commonly used when people are basically saying, if you don't if you don't want something, you shouldn't have it. Or you know, similarly, when people say, you need to love yourself before anybody else loves you, right? I think it's gaslighting. I think it's completely void of any factual information or context. And it makes me really angry when people say things like that, because it so easily and conveniently disregards and belittles the history of what Black and brown people have had to go through in this country to attain things that their counterparts, you know, already had by way of free labor. And it also,
Labor, AKA slavery?
yeah, slavery,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I was gonna say, I need some free labor right now, but I don't want slaves. Okay.
Slavery, the prison industrial complex, the free labor that's going on in private prisons. And I think it's just like a really crappy thing to say, because there are many people who want more for themselves, and there are many people who strive for more for themselves every day. And because of the way our systems are set up, and because of systemic racism that is so craftfully and intelligently designed, because it is a system that there's really no end. It's a system that keeps evolving, you know, like it just keeps growing and evolving, and there are so many loopholes to it. And the forces that be that keep it alive and well, and the forces that be that perpetuate it and welcome it and glorify it, because it is beneficial to, you know, those forces. You know, to say that people don't want things is to put a lot of blame on the people who cannot have the things that they want because of barriers in several sectors of their lives.
Good point. Good point. So to take it a step further, Ife, you know, just speaking about barriers in different sectors of your life, and, you know, there's some people who aren't Black and brown who, you know, grew up poor and grew up in lower middle class or middle class, and they have a hard time as well. But when they show up, the first thing that doesn't differentiate them is how they look, right? And for those people who just can't get past how you look, sometimes that, you know, while poverty or class may connect you, there's a separation when you do come from, you know, communities of color, Black, brown communities, and when you don't. So speaking of challenges you've experienced that it may have made it a steeper climb for you than maybe some of your counterparts to achieve high levels of success, what are some of those challenges that you feel you've experienced when it comes to you trying to ascend to that millionaire GCI success that's talked about in the MREA book, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book?
Yeah, so I think there are I think there are two things, and I'll speak about like the peer-to-peer interaction in the industry first, and then I'll go on to like, you know, how racism is a health crisis that keeps people in poverty and keeps them sick and poor. So to first just talk about peer-to-peer relations, there's something called code switching, where like Black people or people of color, they will, you know, change the way they speak, or they'll change the tone of their voice, or they'll change the cadence in their voice to assimilate to all white spaces. And I know for a fact that when I've called to put in offers for my clients, that the white agent on the other line, the 65-year-old or 65-year-old white man, or the 45-year-old white woman, or 50-year-old white woman, has received me and accepted me because I don't sound the way I look on the phone. And I think it is, and I've gone to settlements where I've like, you know, built rapport with these agents, and maybe they're paying attention, maybe they're not. And I walk into the room and they're surprised it's me, like visually surprised that I'm like a short 5'2" queer, non-binary person who just like negotiated a great deal for my client. And sometimes, you know, there are times where I've thought like, wow, like if I wasn't educated, college educated, didn't go to private school, and didn't have a firm grasp on the English language and enunciation and pronunciation, how many of my clients' great offers would be accepted? How many of these people would take me seriously? How many of these people who are gatekeepers would, allow for my clients to be able to attain their dreams of homeownership and wealth? So that's one instance where I've worked with older folks and had to code switch to get the deal done. And code switching is a survival tactic. It's not something that people like to do. It's not something that feels good on you. It's not something that anyone should have to do. But when you're working in an industry where a large amount of people really value assimilation and really value cultural assimilation, then it becomes something that like you have to do to succeed. And I know that counterparts of mine don't have to do that, right? So then there's a question of like, well, how much of that can I do without completely undermining my own integrity and values, right? Like how much of that, what check is worth doing that every single day? That's a question I ask myself all the time. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is like, when I started real estate, well, I grew up poor. Like I grew up poor, but I didn't know I was poor, if that makes any sense. So like my mom did a lot, my family did a lot to provide for me. I was in private school, like whatever. But we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of access to things. And my mom worked really hard to make it so that I did. I went to school and I pursued a degree in acting, a BFA, which I have. And after school, I was working as an actor, making like $20,000 a year or so. But I was working like 80-hour weeks. So something I noticed, my first year in real estate, I couldn't go to my mom and say, hey, Mom, can I get like a year's worth of living expenses so that I can, work full time in real estate and really focus on it? I couldn't say, hey, Dad, that property that you gave me, I want to sell it because I want to use it to fund this business that I want to start. I couldn't go to a bank and say, hey, can I get a significant personal loan to put some things in action? I had to work part-time as an actor and a realtor. And I'm sure that affected my business, right? Because I was working at Neighborhood Bike Works and on bikes with kids from 10 to 2 every day, and working part-time as a realtor and trying to juggle like being a camp person and acting gigs and real estate. So I think the first, in essence, 1 or 2 years of my business and my potential was stunted because I didn't have the resources to really go all in like I know other people do. I didn't have the capital. I didn't have the financial support. My mother is in debt and could barely pay her bills at the time. So I had to really do it from the muscle. And I really had to dig deep. And I think that's just one of the ways where that's a barrier right there, right? Like if you can start a business and you have the support of a network that is well solidified and prosperous and has the capital and people can support you and lift you up, that's going to drastically change what and how much you can do. That is a barrier in itself. I started real estate with a good friend of mine, and she had a year's worth of savings, and she worked very hard for that. And, she was able to her parents were able to co-sign for a house for her. And like, she was very well set up. And her business just went through the roof that first year. So she didn't have a barrier that I did. So I think when we talk about barriers, it's important to acknowledge that they come in many different forms. And they are, like perpetuated by systems that are in place because once you make it over one barrier, there's another. So those are the barriers I've had to think about and work through.
So I can identify with what you said on a few levels in the sense that, you know, my name is Amber Noble, right? So a lot of times people say to me, wow, you got a great name. Where'd you get that name from? But growing up, they used to tell me I had a white girl name, whatever the hell that means, right? And so actually the name came, my dad's favorite movie was Forever Amber. And, you know, that's where he got my name from. But I also, you know, I talk to people sometimes and I know about code switching. I don't think that I intentionally code switch. I don't think I intentionally change how I talk. But I think that this is how I talk. But I do recognize that there are times when, if I'm ready to go in for the kill on a deal with certain agents, I'll text them before I actually call them. And I'll try to communicate with them intentionally via email and text, either because I have a history with them. I've learned of their history and I did some research on them before I present an offer. And I know that they may have certain inclinations to, you know, not be as favorable when they get an offer from somebody that they don't have a cultural connection with. Why? Because many people in their mind have decided that when you look like this or you're from this community, you must be like that. Now, granted, Ife, people like you and me break a lot of norms, just like Noah breaks a lot of norms, right? So Noah's cool as hell. I've known Noah for 20 some years, pretty consistent. Same guy I met decades ago. And so somebody meeting Noah might think he's a certain kind of way until they get to know Noah. And it's like, yo, Noah's the coolest. So the reality is that there are those biases that exist. And some of us do have to do these workarounds just to, you know, do the same level of business. And it's not easy to keep switching your brain off and on. Okay, can I text this person first or email them first, or can I just pick up the phone and have a real conversation with them?
Mhm.
So there you have it.
Absolutely.
I get it. And I'm sure many of us do as well. So with that being said, moving on, just want to take 2 minutes per panelist. And we want to hear your unfiltered thoughts about the complicated connection between gentrification, tax abatements, lack of affordable housing, unemployment, crime, policing, drugs, politics, community engagement within the Philadelphia tri-state area. I know, Linnell, I just threw a whole bunch of things at them, but just give us 2 minutes of what your thoughts are on those things that seem to affect us all as it relates to real estate.
I'll go. Number one, Ife, you're a rock star. I mean, you had me thinking so many darn things when you were talking. You know, when I was a realtor, I remember, well, I'm still a realtor, but when I was a highly involved realtor, I guess I would say, I had the pleasure of being one of the only minorities in real estate at the time. And I had the pleasure of being the only one that had a gun that was willing to go in Camden to list homes and sell homes. So back in the early 2000s, there was not many realtors that would even go into Camden City. At the time, I remember it's like me, Bob Moz, and there's like I forgot his name, but he's right there in the city. I think Brothers that had a little small independent brokerage in the city. But very, very few people would go, and definitely no people of color really were selling there. So I had every realtor in Gloucester County giving me listings. I mean, I had like 130 listings in Camden. And that's kind of what put me on the map, because I just had so many darn listings. And it got to the point where now, I mean, eventually these folks sold their primaries. And I was a good code person, Iffy, because I could talk all different language that, you know, back in my days when I was single, I was able to talk that language, and I brought it into the business and was able to talk the languages too, which is similar, right? Similar ways to change the game when you had to change it. So I was able to change my game a lot, and which would allow me to be really a top agent at the time. And I think, you know, the one thing that I also regret then is what I was doing. I was making a lot of money in Camden, but I was watching so many renters, and I was watching grandmoms be renters and then great grandmoms be renters. So you could just imagine what happens when that whole legacy is a bunch of renters, right? you start off, it's just a lot harder, right? My dad was locked up in the 60s, had a 8th grade education. So it wasn't like there was anything handed out for me to get where I am. But I just know that my kids are going to be different. They're just different. They're right now they're in Boca Raton, Florida. Their colleges are already there. The money's there. It's a different situation than what I grew up to. And we got to do different in these communities, and we can't keep having great grandmothers renting. And I talked to a guy yesterday, and he told me he grew up really poor, and it was a white trooper who's retired. He's about 62. And he was telling me how his one kid's going to be a rocket scientist for NASA, and his daughter is going to be an attorney and is marrying, a doctor. And we were talking like how that is insane, how his family legacy's changed already. His daughter's average household income is $500,000, and his son, is making $120,000 right out of college. So, I was excited for him, even as a white male. I said, your legacy just changed, man. Your grandkids are going to have a different life, than we had. Ain't that cool? So we definitely got to think about as deep as we can of how we can be better for our next generation. And we got to get our grandmoms not renting and our parents not renting, so those kids have a better start. And when we talk about equity, right, and that's where we fell behind, Amber, years ago, where, just in the 60s, I think we documented there was racial documentation in our real estate documents, right? So there was a long gap of inequality in our country, and we have to make that up in some form or fashion. So I don't know if it's a bunch of me and Noah and a bunch of us on here that have money that we could start doing better with mentorship and programs. I don't know if we got to start doing more recruitment for agents and folks like that. But whatever it is, I do know that a lot of our leaders are committed to that, Amber, and I know I am. And we're going to have to stop having a lot of renters in our inner cities, and we got to start making them homeowners. And they got to be able to keep their house. So they need to have jobs so they can keep paying those payments, because if not, they're going to be in foreclosure and short sales and all the other stuff. So there's just getting the house is one thing. We got to help them keep it too. If that makes sense.
Excellent point. Everything you said, I ditto that. And I know you like to do the snaps, so you get some snaps on that, John Clady, because that was straight fire. So next, Mike Manelis, you could pick any of those topics that I threw out there, because actually John kind of took the next question. He took a lead on it, because the next question was, does the Philadelphia real estate community of realtors and investors bear any responsibility to reinvest human resources and finances in the communities that they're buying, selling, and gentrifying? So I would love to hear your thoughts, Mike, as a transplant, because you said you grew up in the suburbs of Cherry Hill. Now you actually live in the city, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So, do we have any responsibility, in your opinion, as realtors and investors, to also take some onus for those communities? Because I hear a lot of complaining about what the communities look like or don't look like. Oh, the empty lots. So you want to buy the empty lot, but you don't want to clean the empty lot up or turn it into a garden. Like, what's your thoughts on that, Mike?
I mean, personally, I think that if we are working in this city or we own property in this city, we do absolutely owe it to the communities to give back. And I think, that's a great point about the vacant lots and the plight, if you will, that it creates when they're not tended to. And I think that it definitely is up to us as a community of realtors, even if we are not directly involved in this or in specific lots or specific properties. But if we're working in those neighborhoods and we know people in those neighborhoods, to involve ourselves in those conversations, to try to find out, who does own these places. And as realtors, we might want to be doing that anyway to see if there's an opportunity for business. But I think that whether it's helping out at a community garden that you that in an area that you work in, even if you don't live there, or helping out a food kitchen or food drive in neighborhoods that again, maybe you don't work in or you don't live in, but you work in. I think that all of this is very important to strengthening the communities, especially in the outlying neighborhoods of the city, the neighborhoods to the north, to the northwest. I think that there is a lot of opportunity there for us to help strengthen those communities. One of the things I notice when I visit those neighborhoods is that a lot of the residents there don't truly understand the value of the communities that they have. And you can tell by the way that they treat their streets and their sidewalks, and they leave trash. I mean, I think that there is such a great opportunity there from an educational perspective to empower people to understand exactly what they have. A lot of these homes are held generationally. So the grandparents give it to the children and the children give it to their children. And there's so much there for us as a community to help with. And it ties into affordable housing. It ties into unemployment. And then, when we talk about crime and drugs, I think one of the big things when we start to go north is obviously the opioid epidemic. And personally, I'd love to see, the city start to change its perspective on that from a criminal epidemic to a health crisis, and start to treat people that need that help in that way. And I'd love to see developers to start building more affordable housing in these areas. I know that's not always a profitable business, but over time, it does have a great impact for our community. And that rising tide will help to lift all those boats.
You make some interesting points, Mike, and I'll let Ife go next. But something you said I thought was interesting too, because you talk about the opioid crisis. There used to be something called the crack era, right? And a lot of people were crack babies. And so it was criminalized. And now that there's an opioid crisis, which doesn't primarily affect communities, Black and Brown communities as much. I mean, they're certainly affected, but not to the extent that when you go to Kensington in certain parts, and it's literally like zombie town. And now things are starting to be decriminalized. So,
and that back in the 80s, when crack, was introduced into the communities, it was treated as a criminal issue and not a health crisis. And there's a whole backstory to that as well, right, Amber? So.
Sure. Mass incarceration and all that. A lot of that stemmed from the crack era.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Also, too, you made another point about people not knowing the value of their communities. There's a lot that goes along with that too, because a lot of times, I mean, the research shows that a lot of times Black communities and Brown communities are undervalued on purpose so that people can steal them for bottom basement market prices. And then the value then goes up. So yeah, when you see trash strewn around and that sort of thing too, I wonder if it's people don't know the value of their communities, or if that is just, something else in terms of people learning to live a different way. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ife?
I do. I have thoughts on that. I think that people, if you don't have a lot to live for, like, I don't want to say that like all poor Black people in North Philly don't have anything to live for, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, like, if you can't get a loan, if you can't get a credit card, if you can't get a car, if you can't get a job, if you can't get insurance, if you live in a food desert where there is no grocery store near you, why would you treat where you live like an immaculate palace? I think when people say like, oh, you don't care about where you live, and it's like, well, what? These communities are so divested from, like West Philly. There are maps online. You can look them up. It's public information. There are maps online of the communities in Philadelphia that the city has just divested completely from. West Philly, parts of North Philly, parts of South Philly, where the city has said, we don't care what goes on in these neighborhoods. We're going to focus on education and infrastructure in these other neighborhoods. So to say like, so I think it's important to remember that, because if you don't have anything and you can't get anything, even though you want something, picking up trash and keeping your street clean is going to be the least of what's on your top of mind. You can't worry about beautification of your block if you are worried about what you're going to eat, or how to keep your bills on. So I think it's more of a reflection actually on the city and how the city sees these communities and how the city values these communities. I mean, look at our public schools. Penn just donated $100 million over 10 years, $10 million a year to rectify asbestos in our public schools. This has been an issue for years now.
Yep.
Why is this still an issue when I have to pay $5,000 to the city to transfer a property from my name to my LLC, when we have the highest property tax in America? And we have a tax abatement where people buy $1 million properties, $700,000 properties, and don't pay taxes on those properties for 10 years. And Penn should absolutely donate this money. Penn doesn't pay any property taxes. They own a lot of property in the city, and they don't pay taxes on anything. So they absolutely should donate this money. But I think when we start to think about the resources that are lacking and where the contributions are and aren't coming from, we can shift the blame to where it should be, which is leadership and the people who are, in charge and supposed to keep us safe and healthy and make sure we're prospering.
Great point, Ife. Mic drops on all of that. So speaking of hopelessness, right? That feeling of hopelessness, like, what can I do to pull myself up out of this situation? I said to Mike McCann one time, my mom always talked and my grandma always talked about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but some people don't even have any boots that have straps on, right? So, real estate is one of the few career paths and industries that afford Americans the opportunity to make 6-figure, 7-figure, and even 8-figure careers without even having a college education, much less a college degree. How can we as real estate professionals do a better job of outreach to low income and moderate income communities to expose them to the amazing possibilities that careers in real estate can afford them? Because we often talk to people about investing, and that's cool. But if you can't show 2 years of tax returns and enough pay stubs and, have a credit score that is at a certain amount, you have no real estate investment to make. However, that doesn't mean that you can't become a realtor and become a successful one at that. So what can we do better as realtors and experts in exposing our communities to this amazing opportunity that we are a part of from a career standpoint? John?
I have so many emotions about this question. Obviously nothing was handed to me in my real estate business. I started off my first year, I think I did 1 deal. Second year, I think I did 3. And, I was a state trooper at the same time. So I definitely didn't have a lot of time to invest in real estate at the time. I was probably minus 50 hours a week for most, with travel and everything. So, but what I did do was I was always a hard worker, right? So I think no matter what color your skin is, you're going to have to work. And I don't think there's any secret potion for any of us. I mean, I know white realtors that don't have a lot of business. I know black realtors don't have a lot of business. The separation that I think what I've seen is how long are we willing to fail until we succeed? And, for me, failure came a lot. I will tell you that I told a story that I remember a white couple was selling land in Williamstown, and they were from Pennsylvania. So on the phone, I probably, maybe you don't know what color I am, right? So I remember them walking up into the, this is when I first started Keller Williams. I was in a little mega agent office in 1,000 square feet, and we were in a little plaza, and the couple comes up, and it was just 4 of us in this space. and I walk up to the door, and I think I was used to not dress so nice, but when I came to KW, I got dressed in nicer because I was a business owner, right? And I remember going to the door and saying, "Hey, how you guys doing?" And they looked so disappointed. You know, like, I don't know if, and I'm sure some of you agents know, when you went to the door and they see you, and the disappointment looked so, like, almost like they wanted to back up. You know, it was that obvious. And I'm like, "Come on in." And they're like, kind of like real slow walking in, right? And I'm like, "Come sit down." And luckily I had my white assistant right there. And I said, "Come sit down." And they sat down, and really it was so uncomfortable. You could just tell, like, it's like you meeting your in-laws for the first time. It's just not cool. It's not comfortable. That's how it felt. And, you know, as I sat down with them, you know, because I am a coder, Efi, I started to be able to have dialogue that sounded intelligent, I guess. That sounded like I knew what I was talking about. And eventually they gave me a window, which was their son was in the military. So the only time I ever talked about the state police when I was a realtor was when I thought it would help me. So I said, so yeah, they kind of like the uniform. And so I was like, you know, by the way, you know, I'm a state trooper as well. And then you seen the walls come down. It was incredible how me just saying that, almost like the trust came, and my conversation was flowing then. It was like, oh, okay, this is better now. You know, they're listening, and they're like asking me questions. And then obviously I got the listing.
You're not one of them, John.
Yeah, kind of. You know, it really took me to figure out. And listen, I'm competitive regardless. I'm going to figure out a way to get whatever I need to get. But, you know, it was sad that it had to be that I had to work so hard to get that listing. And, you know, I had to break down the wall first, then tell them how cool I am as a realtor, you know? So, you know, I think, you know, I could have stopped there. Right. And I've had other, trust me, there's a lot of different ones, you know, that have happened, but that was the one that stood out the most that I could have stopped. So I think you got to be willing, like any business, that you're going to have ups and downs. You got to have some sort of source of income to pay for whatever, you know, logistical things you have. You know, like any business, you need 3 months of reserves. So I don't think people need to know that when you go into a business, you need to have a plan, and you need to be able to handle ups and downs, especially for us realtors, right? You know, you might have five deals one month and maybe 2 or 1 the next, and you still got to be able to pay your bills and survive and all that stuff. So I think, you know, if you're able to do that and you keep working, just like if you're working out and you just keep dedicating to losing your weight and getting your muscle mass, and you just keep doing it, even when you get sick, you set back a week and then you get right back on, right? I think it's the same thing in business. You got to be able to keep doing that, because I remember so many times where I was like, I'm done. You know, like Amber, this is the perfect. I had a state trooper, and you might know him, Soup Hamilton. He has all these big events in the tri-state area. And I remember he was single trooper, and used to have all the white parties, you know, with all like the comedy shows and all that stuff. And he has some money, right? Single guy, you know, making the state police salary. So I took him to see 50 homes, 50 on the weekend. And then he tells me, "Hey, I'm good, man. I got a for sale by owner. I'm good." I'm like, what?
What?
But I'm saying, you know, you think about things like that where you just wasted 40 or 50 hours. You're like, I'm done. You could easily, I could have quit so many times in real estate. And then, you know, now, you know, obviously I make a couple $100,000 a year, and I don't even do, you know, it runs itself, you know, my team now. So, you know, it's just funny how many times I could have stopped doing it.
So, but John, specifically, you made some great points, because everybody doesn't have that sort of, I don't want to call it wild card in the back pocket, where they could say, you know, I'm a police officer, or I'm a veteran, or whatever. You know, I'm married to a state trooper, right? So, you know, I've been able to leverage that. You know, that's giving me, you're okay because you're married to a cop thing. But that doesn't work for everybody, and that's not everybody's story. And a lot of people in low to moderate income communities, and I'm not even talking about just Black and brown people. I'm talking about Black, brown, white, whatever, people who are all connected by class or income. How can we John and Ife, what can we do better to in terms of outreach to people in low to moderate incomes to say to them, hey, we got an awesome career over here, right? You may come from a family of renters, but we're going to show you how to build, $1 million business by, being a gateway to home ownership and property ownership for people.
Yeah.
Ife, how can we connect with these communities better and become part of the solution to creating economic opportunity?
Well, I think first thing we have to do is acknowledge that these people are not going to trust us, and we have to earn their trust, right? These people are not trusting big banks. They're not trusting cops. They're not trusting a lot of people. So acknowledging that they're not going to trust us, and we're going to really have to, make them believe that we are there for their benefit. I think it's the first step. And I think the second step is, when you're door knocking and trying to get 30 or 40% off, or you're sending your mailers and trying to get 40 or 30% under the market value for someone to purchase a house from someone who doesn't know the true value of your house, then, if you're going to do that and, be transparent about what you're doing, I think that's also a great opportunity to say, hey, do you want to get in real estate, or do you know anybody who wants to get in real estate? Here are some of the things that I was able to do in my career. Going into the neighborhoods, hosting the events, hosting the virtual events, making the calls, having that be a part of when you're, reaching out to people. Like, a lot of us spend a lot of time reaching out to our networks and our sphere, and we spend a lot of time like staying in touch and trying to sell real estate. I think we can spend just as much time, trying to let people know that this opportunity exists, and that, here's how you can do it. Just letting people know that we're interested in uplifting the communities, and uplifting marginalized communities who otherwise, wouldn't have this information. I didn't know anything about real estate until I started. And I know a lot of people who think, a lot of people reach out to me and they want to get started, and I send them to Jeremy, and I don't know how many people, have been converted, or how many people actually I don't think the numbers are vast enough, like for the people who are actually converted into realtors. But I think that gap can be closed with just more attention and intention to closing the gap and reaching the right people.
So do you think we could do, like, some of us, Ife, like some of us, like you and I, we can dance in different worlds, and John Clyde too, right? So we can identify with this group of people over here, and then we can also, go straight into the hood and be very comfortable, in certain spaces, go to a trailer park one day, projects another day, we're in Beverly Hills the next. Do you think that if we are sought out to get more input in terms of recruitment and profit share techniques and strategies and all that, you think that would be helpful, if our opinions, some of us?
I think it would be. Yeah. And I think, and in addition to reaching out to people coming from contribution, and also having a stepping stone for them, whether it's, hey, here are some resources to start taking your classes. Here's my team leader's information, contact them. Here's how to save this much money so that you can start, here's a financial planner or a financial advisor you can speak to get your stuff in order. Reaching out to those people and giving them the resources so that they can work on it themselves as well, and not be so reliant on the people who are bringing them the information.
Got it. Mike McNellis, you had expressed that you wanted to see more effort amongst our agents in working in partnership with leadership to pay attention to how we communicate with each other, how we conduct ourselves, and how we hold each other accountable, holding ourselves accountable first, but just sort of our code of conduct, if you will. What things may have you observed online or offline that struck a chord with you, specifically, from the perspective of a white man, which might be different from, a Black woman or a Black man, or even a white woman? What has struck a chord with you in terms of what you've observed?
Well, I mean, without,
You have to name names.
yeah, I think I think that it goes back to what I said earlier about just having more awareness now and being more sensitive when I do see things. And I think that it's one thing to see it, it's another thing to say something about it and be empowered and feel like you can say something about it. And we're living in a very polarized country right now, and people feel protected with any opinion that they have because there are large groups of people that share that same opinion, and that's unfortunate. And the only way that we can break through that, I believe the only way that we can break through that is engaging in these type of conversations, and layering in education on top of that, or educating first and then being aware enough to have these type of conversations, honest conversations. So the things that I see online that really blow my mind really has anything to do that would even slightly go against the reform that we need right now, at all levels of government and in our market center, to make sure that people feel comfortable with speaking out about these things and doing something about it and coming together and having conversations about it. So
is that why you feel people feel more emboldened to act kind of outrageously, even in our real estate community?
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, people feel very protected within their own opinions because of social media, being able to find other like-minded people who hate and who are evil, and being able to share that in a community with themselves and feel that when they speak out about that in that kind of way, that there's people who are backing those opinions up for them and justifying that behavior.
Okay. Not that you speak for all white people, but do you feel like, generally speaking, just talking to your friends who, culturally you may have some things in common with, do you feel like white people feel attacked in this climate, this current climate? Do you feel like they're being treated fairly?
I think it's completely out of line if they do. When I began to educate myself and really started to understand how, really since Reconstruction, how disenfranchised the Black community has been, and how fortunate people that look like me are in this country for literally doing nothing. And speaking about my generation specifically, and my friends, things that we are handed that others are not because of the way that they look. I don't believe that there is anything that people that look like me have much to be upset about in the grand scheme of things. And I know that's heavy and people are going to disagree with me, but I think personally we have a lot to give back, and we have to be very much more involved in the change that is needed right now.
That's a mic drop, Mike. Thank you for your honesty. Ife, can you quickly give us 3 additional things that you believe we could do in our greater PA tri-state region market centers to address the need to create a more equitable environment for agents who may come from marginalized communities, so that they too can be, more successful and put more points on the board for the market centers? 3 things in about 2 minutes.
Absolutely. I'm going to be 100% transparent too. Keller Williams is the biggest and best real estate franchise in the world. And I think Keller Williams makes a lot of money. And I think Keller Williams needs to start investing real monetary dollars into mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all of their agents. It's what a lot of corporate companies already do. And if they haven't been doing it, they're starting to do it on a more serious level. I think we can also recognize and comes to grips with the fact that systemic racism is a health crisis, like as a community as a whole. And I think that lastly, we can create and enforce anti-racist policy. Put very simply, there has to be consequences for people who are out of line. There has to be consequences for people who say and do racist things, even if it is because of lack of education or just not knowing. But there has to be some type of consequence for harm that is inflicted.
Fair enough. I want to point out, I don't know if you guys can see it, but this shirt I have here, this KWER1, this really cool shirt. Let's see if I can stand up a little bit. This is our Social Equity Task Force shirt, and it was actually curated by Tony Sadiq Lexington. I might have missed one of her names, John. Forgive me if I did. But
you expanded on her name. It's Tony Sadiq Lexington. Yeah.
Oh, Lexington. Okay. So Tony is, one of my sisters in the social equity fight here, and she's out of John Clyde's Washington Township Market Center. She is rising as a leader and someone who's getting things done. And she actually commissioned we're trying to sort of we're trying to get rid of the word minority, because minority really is the new majority, right? And we don't want to diminish people, but someone from a marginalized community who happened to be an African-American design firm, they created this shirt, and we will make sure you can get the link. The shirts are $30, and the part of the proceeds are going to go to our social equity initiatives that we're doing to try to make a better Keller Williams for everybody, both on a local, regional, national, international level. So please support this shirt if you happen to see it. So we're going to wrap up with John Clyde and then leave the last few minutes for some Q&A before we are out of here at 2:30. And John, for anybody who missed Mega Camp, can you please share with us the updates, improvements that have been made in the areas of the Y4C2Ts, and give us a snapshot of what the future of diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like for Keller Williams company-wide? Because I think we know it because you and I are all into it, like all day and night, but they hear social equity task force, and they hear DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So can you just give us a quick synopsis of what is going on with KW and this whole thing? And lastly, can you also tell us why we are social equity and not social equality, and tell us the difference?
You ask a lot of questions there. No, I'm playing.
I do.
So first, yeah, I mean, it was a historic vote. I think if you're plugged into Keller Williams, they've never changed those the Y4C2Ts ever. And we were tasked, Kimber and I were tasked to really make a difference. And we thought, what better way to make a difference than to change kind of the belief system, right? And there was a lot of conversation around equity and equality, and Gary Keller's point was we would like to have both, but if I had to choose, it would be equity, right? And I don't know if it was you, Amber, but probably when this all came around, we had the picture of the baseball field, right? And you had the three different individuals standing there, and and there was a fence there, right? So there's a guy 6 foot tall that can see the fence, doesn't need any assistance, and there's a guy like 5'6", and he does need he needs a little bit of help to kind of see over the fence, and then there's a real short person that's like 5 foot that needs a bigger box, right? So everyone's needs are different, and to say equality, everyone has, we talked earlier throughout this call about everyone has different situations in lives, and my minority kids are going to be different, than maybe some, they have a different head start than some other ones, right? So it's just marginalized now. I know, Amber, we changed that word, so I'm trying to change my own way I speak too. Marginalized children or community. So, I think, when you think about the future of the task force too is, and Ify, you talked about it a little bit. I think Gary Keller does want to donate a lot of money, and he expects the regional owners to donate a lot of money, and he expects the market centers to contribute. The thing I think the things that are going on behind the scenes, and I want to be totally transparent with you guys, and we'll do this, Amber, with everyone, but it's just getting everything right now. meaning the foundation needs to be right. So we know if we have a charitable organization, we're going to be able to get more people to spend money because they can write it off, right? So we're just trying to set up everything right, as opposed to just doing it and say, all right, guys, come on, just give us money and whatever. So we're right now. And then it's also, we're a big company with a lot of changes going on. Obviously Gary Keller, the biggest one. So there's a lot of moving parts. So, we sped up here and then we slowed down. And then, we had a video ready and then we slowed down, and then we had funding and then we didn't. So now it's like Kimber and I, our job is really to keep pushing Keller Williams to stay on task, even though I know they have a big, large business to run. Right. So we've been doing that. So the goal is to obviously get the money, which Amber, I'll tell you, this company has no problem raising money. I don't think money will be our problem. I think our problem is going to be getting people in Idaho and other different parts of the world where there's no minorities to really participate at the level that we would all like to see everyone participate. And listen, I know Philadelphia has more minorities than maybe, in Boise, Idaho, or whatever, or in Boise. However, we are going to, your children are going to go to college. Some of them are going to move somewhere else, and then they're going to have interactions with different people, and they need to be able to handle that. And there's still different classes of individuals who need help and need equity, right? Because they're starting renting, and grandmom's renting, and great grandmom's renting. So, and that's for all colors, right? There's white people that have the same situation. There's Asians, there's Hispanic, and all that. So, our job for us as a task force is to help our KW associates. That's the goal. And the communities that are attached to those associates. So whatever we do, at first, we're going to help our people just like KW Cares. So if you're part of KW, everyone on the call, and your community needs help, you need help, that's who we're going to help first, right? And that's kind of the basis of this. And, like KW Kids Care, we're going to hopefully bring the other youthful folks in here, and other, so that we also touch the communities and recruitment and all that stuff. So, the task force it's a marathon, not a sprint. And we are just tipping what we can do. And with folks like, I know Ify, I think you're on it, and Amber and Stacy, and there's a lot of other faces that I see on here that are on this on the task force. So we're like 3 months in, and we have a whole lot of work to do, is what I can say. And I know we do have a commitment from Keller Williams, and we're going to just keep grinding and making changes and making tweaks. And you're going to start seeing different faces on advertisement and different faces on signs. And you're going to see little changes here and there. And if we keep doing this in time, you're going to see massive changes.
Good point. Here. So thank you for answering all those questions that I asked you, John Clyde. Thank you, Linnell, for putting the link to the t-shirt in. This is an exclusive one, the white, but most of them come in the color black. So if anybody wants a t-shirt, it's in there. And one of the things that's really important when we talk about marginalized communities, it's important that everybody understands that, while the Black house might be on fire first, for anybody who says, well, Hispanic people have issues, and gay people have issues, and these people have issues, and white people. Yeah, we understand that. But this is the house that we're dealing with that has a 10-alarm fire right now. So we're dealing with this house, and the opportunities that we are putting into place are going to be ones that everybody can benefit, because then we'll move on. Once we get these folks over here straight, we're going to move on to the next, and then on to the next. And I think something that's also important with the 5Y4C2Ts is that, if I'm not mistaken, John, when we use the word marginalized communities, we also put other people into that umbrella, like veterans, people with disabilities, developmental disabilities, like my daughter who has autism, and people who may have physical disabilities, not just based on race, but people who are literally from communities where they only get a margin and not the
That's
full
exactly
page.
right. Yep. I mean, there's a big list of, we try to put every individual we thought we could in there, just so that there's no question when we need to help all people. We meant all people.
That's right. That's right. So as you can see, marginalized means more than just race and minority. So with that being said, this has been a very robust conversation. We want to use these last 7 minutes to open it up for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions that you want to ask live? If so, just raise your hand or put in a chat, and by all means ask. Questions or anything you want to just contribute to the last 7 minutes.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say how proud I am of all you guys and to be a part of this. This was really a powerful, I think probably the most powerful day that we've had for Education Week so far. And, you know, the panelists are just amazingly well-spoken and able to get their points across in a way that maybe some people haven't heard before. So I'm just very proud to be a part of this, and thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah, for actually stepping out early on in this. And thank you for putting people from marginalized communities in positions of leadership like myself before George Floyd. And, you know, really creating balance within our market centers. So I tip my hat to you, Noah, because you've been about that life for a long time. And I'm grateful for you. Thanks for making this a priority too. Stacy, you had a comment you wanted to make? You could take yourself.
Yeah, you guys did a phenomenal job. I learned so much. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to add, you know, I have a feeling the people on this call are open to hearing, you know, about other people's experiences. So this is like preaching to the choir. But if you're like me and you have family members or friends that might have a different perspective, it's best put on your realtor rapport building hat and come from curiosity where people are coming from when they have certain beliefs. So just like a for sale by owner doesn't know they have a problem, they don't see what they're missing or how you can help. Just try to build that rapport with them. Understand, you know, what is it about saving the commission that's important to you? You know, what is it about this word triggers you, or, you know, you don't like? So just be mindful of that. And that way you can preserve those relationships that personally I have felt very difficult over the past year, because, you know, it feels like when family members and people say things that are mean and nasty, you're like, how could somebody I love say that? And it's just a matter of understanding where they're coming from and asking good questions. Because as I'm told, I can't lose my family member over something that's not, you know, directly impacting our relationship. You know, it's just not smart.
Thank you for that, Stacy. Susanna, you wanted to say something?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to all of you. Two things. First, on the concept of marginalization, what comes to mind was at MegaCamp and Gary was talking about the economy and the K-shaped recovery. Part of our education, for those of us that look like I look, is to educate our peers that feel that they're not marginalized, that we are all, it's all connected. You know, if something's like you talk about the fire, people who feel sheltered, as Mike so clearly and honestly, you know, described, and Gary has also, we sometimes have to educate our peers to wake up to the fact that that fire in the house next door is going to impact you. So whatever your belief system, even just from an economic standpoint, you better wake up, right? You know, so even aside from the loaded conversations around race and ethnicity and background, even if we take it to an economic education, that K, just as I forget his name said, that K is going to collapse, and the privileged are not going to be as protected as they think they are. And we all benefit, coming back full circle to say that even from a standpoint of privilege, those that feel that they're immune, they don't know that they will benefit from the marginalized is no longer marginalized.
Good point.
The question I had, and I felt like, I'm sorry, I was traveling and I was listening, a wonderful hour. A question that you brought up, I felt like I would love to hear more about from the panelists, is feedback about language within the office, language within our peer groups, you know, sensitivities to how we as realtors within KW Mainline, KW Field, how we interact and what could be an educational opportunity. I'm on the education task force for Mainline. So immediately jumping to, can we have these real conversations? Can we have some follow-up groups about maybe thoughtless expressions that are not meant to be harmful, but might bring somebody down who's already having a struggling day, right?
That's a great point. Actually, Mike McNellis is very passionate about that same subject. We all are, but Mike is really leading the charge on that, in terms of conduct and best practices and conversations and, how we communicate with one another. He's leading the charge, and we're supporting him through our local task force for KW Philly. So since our leadership is pretty much one and the same, maybe you and Mike can collaborate with us on that being a mainline and KW Philly effort. What do you think about that, Mike?
Susanna, an opportunity for us to work together again. I welcome that.
Okay. So Noah, that's that meeting I told you I wanted to get on your calendar, you and Mike Goldstein and Mike McMahon. So we'll follow up. We just wanted to kind of get through the election and get through this panel first. Susanna, thank you for those thoughtful contributions. LaKayla, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I did. Hi, everybody. I'm from Virginia Beach. I don't know. I feel like I'm the only one, maybe from a different region. But what was the young lady that just spoke a few minutes ago? Was it Stephanie? Yes, Stacy. Kind of to her point, those that come on these, because I saw your post earlier this morning, Amber, so I didn't even realize it was going on. So I cleared my calendar. And at first I was planning on doing some other work, but I've been kind of all in since it started. But to her point, those that are open will come on to these calls. How are you coming up with encouraging those who aren't voluntarily coming on? Because when we talk about what can we do, that's how we need to you work within your world is how I feel. And how do you encourage those agents that still elect basically not to have anything to do with it? I'm going to talk to John later offline. As far as my market center is doing absolutely nothing, and they will continue to do nothing, I think, as long as they feel they can get away with it because they're comfortable where they are. So in other words, how are you encouraging others to get involved in conversations that you don't see show up on these Zooms, or they haven't been involved in any conversations yet? How do you encourage those to take place?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
So,
and wait 1 second, Linnell, is this going to cut us off? No? Okay, go ahead, John.
And I'll make it quick because I have another commitment. But the goal that we have is that the ALC committees, that we made that a mandatory thing. The ALC has to have a social equity. Now, again, I don't know the sizes of these ALCs, but we also asked that one of the committee members has to be a staff member. Because listen, we're not going to force anybody. I don't know about you guys, anybody that's not passionate about growth, equity, finance, whatever the task force is, they're not going to give 100% to it either. So we're kind of already having a little bit of an issue when someone's not even committed to that. So what we're trying to do is work through the leaders of these offices and the regional directors, because if they're not committed, then we have a problem, right? Look, Kayla, like if the RD saying I'm not committed, Gary Keller has a problem with that. I know that. And myself and Kimber as the co-chairs of this have a problem. And then if the market centers are not committed, which I'm sure you and I will talk offline, then I'm going to talk to the RD who I know your RD should be very involved, and we'll get him involved. That listen, we have an expectation that you're going to, at least if no one wants to do it, guess what? One of your leaders are going to do it. And we're going to force feed the awareness to them of why it's important. And our goal is to hopefully that they either leverage it or start to get someone else and get them involved. But listen, that's just probably the struggle our whole country will have on this battle. But that's the only thing that we're going to do is kind of force leaders that if you have no one, then the leader has to be involved is kind of our commitment.
And John makes a great point. And LaKayla, I'll just kind of add to that. Some ideas that come to mind for me is you see how Noah is sitting here, you know, it's 90 minutes to 2 hours of his day, but he thought it was important enough to sit on here. He didn't just relegate it to somebody else. He didn't say, you know, Andrew, you're broker of record for PA. My brother, Andrew Grismondi right there. Andrew, you sit in for me. Noah's sitting here because it's important enough for him to be here. And I know that if John Clyde wasn't on here, Noah would have still been sitting here because it's a priority. So having somebody in a position of authority and influence show that it's important to them is going to make it important to other people, other agents, other people in leadership. You know how it goes, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, guess what? What's the best form of advertisement and marketing? Word of mouth. You went to the last restaurant because the reviews were great, right? You went to the last movie. Well, you got to watch it on Netflix now, but you saw the last movie because you heard it was great, or you avoided it because you heard that it sucked. So what are we going to do? All my 60 something beautiful people that hung around, and we had as many as 90 on here. I'm challenging and charging every last one of you to go into the private Facebook group for each of your market centers. Michaela, you're in Virginia Beach. Nafisa, you're in PA somewhere. Everybody in here, and let's post something in the KW Philly private group. Let's post something in KW Mainline. If you feel like you got value here and this session mattered, give us a testimonial, right? Say something about it, because then people are going to feel like they missed out. And then encourage them. There's a replay, right, Linnell? Can they get the replay? Yep.
Okay. I will go out with a recap of the recording.
Okay. So tell them to be on the lookout for in their spam and their junk folders, in their email, because we're going to email them a recap and a replay so they can miss out on this hot, juicy conversation. You know, people want to hear what's salacious, but when it seems like it's going to be too cerebral, they ain't have any time. So make this sound like a money-making conversation in your Facebook groups, and let them, you know, maybe be influenced in that way. And then lastly, I just want to say, you know, fighting for justice is never easy. It's a generational thing. It's going to go on forever. So the people who are in this good fight, we just got to stay pushing it. We got to stay pushing it. And Arthur Ashe has a quote that I love. It says, "Start where you are, do what you can, you know, and right where you are, right? Just start right here and do whatever you can. And just trust that things are going to get better. You know, things are going to get better." Anyone else before we wrap up?
Thank you, Amber, and everyone that participated.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to run, but I appreciate this was awesome.
This was awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to be looking for your testimonials. Thank you, Noah, and everybody. John, thank you for your time. Ife, good girl. Mike, great job, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Be well, everybody. Stay safe. Wear your mask.
Great job, everybody.